Dr. John Jaquish. Weightlifting is a Waste of Time is the name of his new book. I read that whole thing. He's also the creator of the X3 and a bunch of other things. He's holding up. Who's that good looking man there on the cover?
That's me.
That's
amazing, right?
That is you, dude.
That's why I tell my friends, never doubt my badassness.
Well, for one, I just want to say I appreciate you coming on. I've heard about you for a long time. Then your people connected with me, sent me an X3 bar and the book. So I truly appreciate that. And, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah.
So let's just get into it. You have a PhD. You're a very smart guy. What's your PhD in?
Biomedical engineering.
So what is it exactly that you do? I mean, you're an inventor. You do all sorts of different things. You got the X3 out. You've got your author. A little bit about your background here.
Well, where I got all started was my medical device, OsteoStrong. So I developed a machine that increases bone density or can increase bone density if used correctly with the right population, faster than any drug that's ever been trialed. And there's no side effects. So we have 150 clinics in 8 different countries. And I developed that to treat my mother's osteoporosis and reverse that completely. Wow. So she's in her 80s and has the bones of a 30-year-old.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And that forced me to see something when I was developing that product and doing the clinical assessment of it at a hospital in London. I was in London back and forth and basically for a long time. University of East London as well. And so I was forced to really look at the kind of forces that were going through bone and determine that the capacity in impact ready ranges of motion. So like when you trip and fall and you put your hands up to keep your face from hitting the ground, there's always one position that people take. Little kids, elderly people, if they can react, they all react with the same biomechanics. So I looked at those biomechanics. Those biomechanics are capable of absorbing or creating 7 times the amount of force that we would normally pick in weight training. Because you pick whatever you can handle in the weaker range. Because the weaker range is important.
Right.
For blood flow, for stimulus, for stretching, through the whole movement, everything. For constant tension. So I looked at the data I was collecting and I said, so people, depending on the position, they're 7 times stronger than they think they are. So when we're in the weaker position, we're actually putting more stress on the joint than we are on the muscle because it's sort of the end of the range of motion. And then when we're in the stronger range, there's hardly any activity in the muscle at all because that weight is actually weak compared to what the muscle could actually handle. So I said it while we were doing the research there, I'm like, this proves weightlifting is a terrible stimulus for muscle growth because we just have one weight. Like if you handle it, whatever you handle at the bottom of the bench press, the same weight at the top. That's idiotic if you know what kind of force capacities that we have. Right. So we need a weight that changes as we move. Now, a lot of people will say weightlifting has, because I had to do some soul searching here. I already had a great business going on with OsteoStrong. Tony Robbins is a partner in that. And that's a successful business. So why would I go and launch something else? Right. And ultimately, the answer came to, I have incredible data that will completely change and improve an industry. Really just actually throws out the entire industry and, in favor of something better, more simple, completely portable. You can keep it in a drawer in your house. So you no longer have to tell your wife to park outside because you got your CrossFit rack in her parking spot and your fake plastic weights so you can make your videos for Instagram.
From your research, weightlifting, why isn't it as efficient for adding muscle tissue? I mean, that's a lot of the premise of your book, right? Weightlifting is
it's exactly what I just said. It's like you're handling the same weight, but you have dramatic, like 7-fold different capacities for producing or absorbing force from weak range to strong range. So if you know there's a variance of 7-fold, why would you train with a static weight? It makes absolutely no sense. It guarantees you have the maximum amount of cumulative joint damage. I see people like, oh, they got to get a stretch in, while they're, at the bottom of the bench press. And it's just like, so, do that for 10 years and you're going to have trouble putting your shirt on.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just going to damage it a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then, all of a sudden you can't train anymore. All you feel is pain.
So, in your book, you talk about those inhibitory signals that people, when they're going through those ranges, and that with the X3, you take away, some of those inhibitory signals, so essentially that you're going to get more activation out of that. Can you discuss, what that is for in layman's terms for somebody that talking about, you use bench press as a common theme, going through this when you're at the end range or beginning range of the motion. But what are those inhibitory signals, and why is it important to be aware of that?
Well, your body has a way of shutting you down when you're hurting yourself. So a lot of times when someone is when they're lifting and they're not getting stronger, it's because the body's really shutting the muscle off because you're just creating damage. So instead of going to fatigue, it's really just a trauma response, and you never get to muscular fatigue at all. So you never grow. And this is why so many people go in the gym year after year, their joint pain increases, but they never look any different.
Mm-hmm. Why have people been doing it? And as a personal trainer and stuff, obviously, like even me having this conversation, like, Joey, why would you talk to somebody that says weightlifting isn't beneficial? But I want to know what the research says, what works, what gets faster results, and then you can incorporate things. And I think people sometimes they have their Bible, right, and then they read it, and then that's the only thing that matters, regardless of any other new research that comes out. Like, you can still have your Bible,
right?
You can read other things.
Most people are not intelligent enough to be anything other than a follower.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they see some other people around them succeed, they're like, oh, well, I'll check it out. But if you believe that something is the way it is, everyone around you can fail, and you'll still believe that.
Yeah. A lot of these studies that you point to in the book, are these based off of the variable resistance specifically, like in and of itself, or are some of them using bands, variable resistance for people who are listening, just a band with weights, or are they all specifically pointing directly to using this variable resistance?
The variable resistance has been tested in different sort of test lab environments. Sometimes weight is added, static weight. So it's a portion of static weight and a portion of accelerated weight in the stronger ranges of motion. So but it's very light what they're doing. So they might be holding X at the bottom of a movement, X, whatever weight it is, and then like 1.2X at the top. Whereas we're doing like X at the bottom and 5X at the top. And that's because we want to do more than like one repetition.
Right.
So you can get multiple repetitions. You can truly exhaust the ATP, glycogen, and creatine phosphate out of the muscle. So more is required to maintain muscle endurance for the next exercise session. And that, combined with the hypoxia and the higher loads, which gives you more muscle protein synthesis and more testosterone. The protein synthesis and the testosterone are really force dependent. So like if you're not going heavy, like you're not growing like that. You're not getting it. Like you got to go heavy. Nobody does 20, with regular weight, 20 rep sets and, is going to be like a relevant strength athlete.
Right. Yeah.
Reps.
Yeah. And that's a big misconception too. People, if they're doing 20, 25 reps and they're not pushing their tissue to, complete muscle failure, it doesn't matter, how many reps you did. So in your protocol though, this is really interesting. You're, for the most part, only prescribing one set, well, let's say per body part. There's your advanced protocol. You have a couple ones where you did like a pre-exhaustion type thing in there. But is one set truly going to be enough to induce enough tissue growth? I mean, because when you look at other studies, they say, I think, you and I had a conversation on Instagram months back about Schoenfeld, one of the studies about 10 to 20 sets per body part per week by way of, machine or, resistance training. You're doing one set.
Right. Well, all the most powerful adaptive responses, like suntan or callus. There's other ones, but everybody knows what a callus is and what a suntan is. So they respond to the most powerful stimulus, which is the greatest amount of energy going into the body in the shortest period of time to cause the irritant. Mm-hmm. I mean, exercise is an irritation, and how we respond to that irritation is growth. And there's two different types of growth. There's sarcoplasmic and myofibril. So the reason people do multiple sets with weight training is because the stimulus is totally weak. Like, how many sets do you need to do in the sun to get a suntan?
Like a 20, right? Yeah. Was that a 20-minute set maybe to get a suntan?
It doesn't even make sense. It's like you go out once and that's it.
So meaning for the X3, you say you only need to do this, one exercise once, right? So you're doing chest once, biceps once, so on and so forth. So if you're looking at somebody that's actually pushing themselves via resistance training, weight training, whatever terminology you want to put to it, are those results going to be similar or better, or do you not have data on that specifically?
I would have to take a number of in the book, I take a number of studies and explain, because of the mechanisms, we know that somebody who's doing 20 sets is going to get a lot of joint damage and a little stimulus.
With it seems that are adopting this, so are they completely just putting away their weight training completely? They're just doing the skill work and then they're using the X3?
I tell them to. Yeah. Now the heat, that's exactly how it works. With some of the NFL guys, because I'm working with them directly, Andy Isabel, he's one of the fastest receivers in the NFL. Great example. Like, his strength coach looked at it and is like, man, I'm just afraid we'll lose a little bit of power if we drop weights and go to this. So he wants Andy to do both now. Andy's become faster, so that's good.
Right.
And he's seeing success, but the success is diminished if you throw, other stimuli in there, because that interferes with the recovery and everything.
Right.